Today, we were going to look at how you can achieve one of the most important elements of bonsai design. It's called no trace of the artist. This means that when the tree is finished, there should be no visible signs of wire or string that was used to manipulate the branches into their positions. And pruning scars should also be hidden from view. In other words, the final tree should appear as natural as possible. There are two main reasons why this is such an important principle in bonsai. First, it helps to increase the age and maturity of the tree. For example, if you have two trees of the same species in size and shape, but one has visible wires and the other doesn't, which one do you think looks older? Most people would say the tree without the wires because it just looks more natural. But there's another reason why it's important to have no trace of the artist. Bonsai is supposed to represent a tree that has been growing in the wild for many years, often hundreds or even thousands. If the tree has visible scars or markings from its training, it will detract from the illusion. The first step to achieving no trace of the artist is to remove all the wires. This is pretty easy to do, but it's important to do it correctly so that you don't damage the bark or branches. There are two main ways to remove bonsai wires. The first method is to simply cut them off with wire cutters. This is the quickest and easiest way, but it can leave behind unsightly scars on the trunk or branches. The second method is to slowly and carefully pry the wire away from the branch, using a tool like a flathead screwdriver or a pair of pliers. This method takes longer and requires more skill, but it produces a much cleaner result. No matter which method you use, always make sure to disinfect your tools before and after use to prevent disease. Also, try to remove the wires during the growing season when the tree is most active. This will help to minimize the amount of scarring that occurs. Once the wires have been removed, the next step is to deal with any pruning scars. This can be a bit more tricky, but there are a few things you can do to hide scars. The first thing to remember is that fresh scars will eventually heal over and become less noticeable. However, this can take several months or even years. So if you have recently pruned your tree, the scars may still be visible. To speed up the healing process, you can apply a pruning sealer to the wounds. This is a special type of paste that is designed to protect the tree from disease and decay while it heals. Pruning sealers come in both natural and synthetic varieties. Natural sealers are made from plant-based oils and butters like beeswax or coconut oil, while synthetic sealers are made from petroleum-based products. Either type can be effective, but I prefer to use natural sealers whenever possible. To apply pruning sealer, simply rub a small amount into the wound using your fingers or a cotton swab. In addition to using a pruning sealer, you can also try to hide the scars by growing leaves or foliage over them. This is especially effective if the scars are on the branches rather than the trunk. You can encourage new growth by fertilizing your tree and providing it with bright indirect light. Another technique you can use is called grafting over. This involves placing a healthy bud or scion onto the tree and then growing it out over the scar. This method is more complex and requires practice, but it can be very effective if done correctly. Grafting over can also be used to hide large knots or blemishes on the trunk of the tree. Sometimes, despite your best efforts, there will still be some scars that are impossible to hide. In these cases, you can try to disguise them by manipulating the branches and foliage around them. For example, if the scar is on a horizontal branch, you can try to train the branches above it to grow upwards. This will help to draw attention away from the scar and towards the more interesting parts of the tree. You can also try to use the pot to help hide the scar. For example, if the scar is on the front of the tree, you can place the pot in such a way that it partially obscures the view of the scar. Another thing you can do is to simply accept the scars and learn to love them. After all, they are a natural part of the tree's growth and development. Sometimes the imperfections are what make the tree unique and beautiful. There are a few things to keep in mind when deciding how to deal with pruning scars. First, the size and location of the scar will determine the best course of action. Small scars on the branches can often be hidden by growing foliage over them, while larger scars on the trunk may require grafting over or other more complex techniques. Secondly, the age of the scar will also play a role. Fresh scars will be more difficult to hide than older scars that have had time to heal. Finally, the style of the bonsai and the species of the tree should also be taken into account. Some styles of bonsai, such as the informal upright, emphasize the natural, unpruned appearance of the tree, while other styles, such as the formal upright, have a more refined, manicured look. When in doubt, it is always best to err on the side of caution and take a more conservative approach to pruning and wiring. It takes a lot of patience and practice to get good at this. Don't expect to be able to completely hide all of your scars right away. But with practice, you will improve and your bonsai will become more natural looking as a result. Now, let's take a closer look at a few examples of no trace of the artist in action. In this first example, you can see a tree that has been wired, and the wires have been removed. However, the scars left by the wires are still visible. Over time, the scars will heal, but they will still be noticeable. To hide the scars, we could apply a pruning sealer, or we could grow leaves over them. In this next example, you can see a tree that has been pruned, but the branches have been placed in such a way that the scars are hidden. This is a great example of how you can use branch placement to hide scars. In this last example, you can see a tree that has been shaped with wire and the wire has been removed. Not only are the scars hidden, but the tree looks natural and alive. This is what we strive for when we practice no trace of the artist. To recap, the no trace of the artist is an important principle in bonsai. It means that the final tree should look natural, as if it were a miniature version of a tree growing in the wild. To achieve this look, we need to remove all of the wires and any pruning scars. It takes practice, but with time you will improve. Just remember to be patient and enjoy the process. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe for more bonsai content. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy bonsaiing.